Hey, and welcome to English Coffee House. I'm Daria.
And I'm Chris. We're really happy you're here with us.
Get comfortable.
And let's start with today's conversation.
I've been thinking about something lately, about how much we're willing to give up in order to feel safe.
That's interesting timing, actually. I was reading about a new surveillance initiative somewhere in Europe. Cameras, facial recognition, all of it. And the justification was exactly that. Safety, protection, the greater good.
And people accepted it?
Most of them, apparently. And I don't think that's cynicism or ignorance. I think people genuinely feel that if they have nothing to hide, they have nothing to fear.
That phrase always stays with me, nothing to hide, because it sounds so reasonable on the surface, and yet something about it feels off.
It assumes that the only reason someone would want privacy is guilt, and that's a very narrow way of seeing a person.
Exactly. Privacy isn't about secrets, it's about space. The space to think, to be uncertain, to change your mind without it being recorded somewhere.
There's something almost philosophical in that. The idea that freedom isn't just what you're allowed to do, it's what you're allowed to become. And surveillance, even when it's benign, quietly narrows that.
It changes how you behave, not because anyone forces you to, but because you know you're being watched. And that knowledge alone is enough.
Foucault called it the panopticon effect. You don't need the guard and the cower, just the possibility of the guard is sufficient.
And we've built that possibility into almost every corner of our lives, voluntarily in many cases.
Which is the part that I find most fascinating and maybe a little unsettling. The surveillance that worries me isn't only the government kind, it's the kind we invited in ourselves. The apps, the devices, the platforms that know us better than most people do.
And we accepted that trade almost without noticing. Convenience for data, connection for transparency. It happened so gradually.
So gradual that it didn't feel like a choice. It just felt like progress.
And maybe that's the real tension. It's not freedom versus security in some dramatic political sense. It's more quiet than that. It's the small daily decisions, what we share, what we allow, what we don't even question anymore.
I think about that with my phone sometimes. The location history, the search patterns, the way an algorithm can predict what I'll want before I've even thought about it. And part of me finds that impressive. Another part finds it deeply strange.
Because something that knows you that well also has a kind of power over you, even if it never uses it.
The potential is enough, and potential in the wrong hands or the wrong moment becomes something else entirely.
So where does that leave us? Because I don't think the answer is to disconnect entirely. That's not realistic, and honestly, I'm not sure it's even desirable.
No, I think it's more about awareness, not paranoia, but a kind of honest clarity about what we're trading and why, and whether the exchange still feels right to us.
A conscious relationship with the systems around us rather than a passive one.
Which is harder than it sounds, because these systems are designed to make passivity feel completely natural.
That's the real design challenge, isn't it? Not the technology, but the attention, where we direct it. How much of it we keep for ourselves.
And I think attention is something we underestimate as a form of autonomy. We talk about freedom in terms of rights, laws, permissions, but the freedom to direct your own attention, to decide what enters your mind and what doesn't, that might be the most fundamental kind.
And the most quietly contested, because there are entire industries built around capturing it, not forced, just by making themselves impossible to look away from.
Which brings up a question I find genuinely difficult. If something is designed to be compelling, if it's engineered to hold your attention, how free is the choice to engage with it?
That's where the philosophy gets uncomfortable, because we like to believe our choices are ours. And in a technical sense, they are. No one's holding a gun to anyone's head. But the architecture of the choice, that's been shaped very deliberately.
There's a difference between freedom in theory and freedom in practice. And I think we sometimes confuse having options with actually being free.
A menu with 100 items where 90 of them lead to the same place.
Exactly. The appearance of variety without the substance of it.
Insecurity works the same way sometimes, doesn't it? The appearance of safety, the feeling of being protected, even when the threat it's responding to is less certain than the freedoms being surrendered for it.
Fear is a very effective justification, and not always a dishonest one. Sometimes the fear is real, the threat is real. But even then, the response to fear deserves scrutiny, maybe especially then.
Because crisis is when the most permanent decisions get made, and they get made quickly, in a climate where questioning them feels almost indecent.
You don't want to be the person who asks, "But are we sure this is necessary?" when everyone around you is frightened.
And yet, that's precisely when the question matters most.
History is full of those moments where something temporary became structural or an exception became a norm, and no one really chose that. It just solidified.
Like sediment, layer by layer, until it's the ground you're standing on and you've forgotten it wasn't always there.
Which makes me think that the line, the one between freedom and security, isn't drawn once. It's drawn constantly, and mostly in very small moments that don't feel like decisions at all.
Every time we accept a new term of service without reading it, every time we say, "I have nothing to hide," every time we assume that someone, somewhere, is making sure it doesn't go too far.
The delegation of vigilance.
Which is human and understandable. We can't scrutinize everything. We're not built for that kind of sustained attention.
But maybe the question isn't whether we scrutinize everything. Maybe it's whether we stay awake to the things that matter most to us, each of us individually, what we're not willing to trade.
Your own version of the line.
Because I don't think there's a universal answer. I think there's a personal reckoning, and most people haven't quite had it yet, not fully.
Including us, probably.
Including us.
I think what stays with me is how personal it actually is. We talk about these things in big terms, systems, structures, society, and all of that is real. But underneath that, it comes back to something very individual, what you need in order to feel like yourself.
And that's different for everyone. Some people genuinely feel safer when there's more structure around them, more oversight, more order, and that's not weakness, that's just a different relationship with uncertainty.
And others feel most alive in the spaces that aren't defined yet, the ones where nothing is watching, nothing is optimizing, nothing is nudging them in any direction.
I think I'm somewhere in between. I want enough security to think clearly, but I want enough open space to think for myself.
Maybe that's the most honest position. Not a fixed point on a line, but a kind of ongoing negotiation with the world around you.
And with yourself, because sometimes the thing limiting your freedom isn't external at all. It's your own fear, your own need for certainty.
Which is the hardest one to see, because it doesn't feel like a constraint, it just feels like being careful.
Or being realistic or being responsible. All the respectable names we give to the places where we've quietly stopped questioning.
I don't think the answer is to question everything relentlessly. That's exhausting, and it leads nowhere good either.
No, I think it's more like keeping a small part of yourself genuinely unresolved on these things. Not anxious, just open.
Willing to be surprised by your own position.
Willing to notice when the ground has shifted under your feet and decide, consciously, whether you want to stay there.
That feels like enough, not a solution, just an orientation.
A way of moving through it, rather than having it settled once and for all.
Because I don't think it ever is, and maybe that's fine. Maybe that's actually the point.
That the line was never meant to be permanent, just honest, for now.
Thanks for spending this time with us.
We really enjoyed having you here and sharing this conversation.
Keep listening
And we'll see you soon.
here at English Coffee House.